Good morning.
Good morning.
Please feel free to move about in any way that would be helpful to you to see or hear or be more comfortable. Oh, good. I don't feel so lonely. I was at a conference this week. I was on a screen with other people at a conference, which is kind of like at. And one of my Dharma sisters was in a breakout group with her and talking with her about things. And she just kind of mentioned how she'd been in her apartment for 6 months. She's in an urban area and she hasn't been able to leave. And she lives by herself. And then thinking how I just feel lonely if there's not someone in the seat, like right here, and how grateful I am for our community and where we are at this time, where we can meet in person and to benefit from each other, just very simply and straightforwardly. It's such a gift that I think we take for granted most of the time. And if there's an upshot to a pandemic, I think maybe one of them is that we're appreciating more what it means to just be present for each other, how much that makes our life possible. Something which in the Buddhist teachings we talk about that all the time, but it's actually really hard to just feel it directly because we usually have it. And so in the absence of that, there's a way that we can feel it. This is one of the reasons I think that individual retreat, hermit practice, one of the things that makes it powerful is that people can feel something that's harder to feel when you're getting that kind of support. And then that support goes away, you can feel the importance of it in a way. So just to remind you to be thankful for all of the beings which support your life, not only in the ways that are really clearly like feeding you, giving you air, but all of the beings which just are, that make your life what it is. And in fact, that's what I'd like to speak about this morning a bit more. This will be the third talk on the freedom of generosity. Generosity being the first of the practices that are outlined within the Prajnaparamita texts. Those practices are known as the perfections, the 6 perfections. The perfection, I'm always saying it's a little bit of a loaded word, especially if you're a perfectionist, which I'm not. And so the perfection, that word works pretty good for me. But if you know yourself as somebody who's kind of a perfectionist, maybe think of the translation, which is crossing over. That's another way to understand what that word paramita means, as a crossing over from the realm of suffering to the realm of nirvana. That would be the classical way of understanding it. We could think about it as a crossing over or an opening, a liberation. Each of these practices is about liberation, and about liberation over the long term, but also liberation in a really immediate sense. Right? How is our life different when we live through these paramitas? Not just how will it be different later, but how's it different right now? Right? So last week I was explaining that I wanted to start this time talking about generosity from the subtle side, or from a very profound side. Oftentimes when I teach on generosity, this is just my habit, I like to teach the other direction. I like to say, don't think, just do it, right? Just do it. And then in the just doing it, you will start to move into subtler and subtler realms of what generosity is about. But if you just do the most gross form that you can muster, it will call something out of you. And as it calls that out of you, you'll find another step in, another step in, another step in, and the subtler qualities of generosity will appear. But this time I want to focus on the subtle side, the profound side. If you write the character I'm thinking about in Chinese, Gen, it means unrefined. It means dark. the origin is related to something about the darkness of the night sky. You think about that, the darkness of the sky. The darkness of the sky is spacious, is deep, and is full of possibility. It's completely ungraspable. It's all pervasive. In fact, it's what we call prajna itself. Wisdom itself is all of those qualities. Subtle, ungraspable, spacious. And so when we talk about this quality, the subtle quality of generosity, we can think of that. We can think of what is the sky like. So present, but so unobtainable. And the reason that I want to emphasize this is because it's so easy to get caught up in the gift. And when we think about generosity, almost always our mind is going to the gift itself, whether that's a gift that we're receiving or a gift that we're giving. We get very locked in the thing, right? If you're out looking for birthday presents, two of my daughters were born in August, and then my brother and my sister-in-law and our good friend, I was like all these people, and I love to buy birthday presents. I really, it's so fun. I don't like giving gift cards and whatever. I mean, I don't mind getting gift cards, but if I'm going to give something to someone, I want to think about what I want to give them, and then I like to find something. And sometimes I make something, although mostly I'm lazy, and mostly I buy something and I give to them. But that whole process of thinking about it, I'll get really focused on the gift, right? Like, what is it? What's the right thing? What's the right thing? Which is good. But that's where our mind goes really quickly when we think about generosity. Well, what is the thing? What do I have to give? What is it that I need to receive? What is it that I'm receiving? What is it that I'm giving? And the marks of the gift become a focus so quickly. So I think it's important for us to think about generosity and how is it that we can loosen up on only thinking about the gift, but thinking about the totality of generosity. In our chants before meals, we always have a short chanting service before we receive a meal at the temple. And in the beginning part of those chants, many of you have practiced them before, we say, now we set out Buddha's bowls. May we with all beings realize the emptiness of the three wheels, giver, receiver, and gift. And then we take the bowls that we're eating with and we set them out. And then we receive the food, and there's more chanting. Eventually we eat it. But it's such a beautiful way to begin this practice of generosity. We don't just put out any bowls. Actually, we do. We have very specific bowls that we eat with sometimes, and then other times we just put out whatever bowl we have. But no matter what the bowl is, that is Buddha's bowl. That bowl that we put out is we're going to receive as the Buddha received. That's what makes it the Buddha's bowl. And so we first say, I'm receiving with Buddha's bowl. And then may I and all beings, not just me, but may all beings realize the emptiness of the three wheels. Okay? And those three wheels are the giver, the receiver, and gift. So the giver, the receiver, and the gift itself are all empty. And here empty means that they're whole. That each of those things is totally itself. The giver is totally the giver. The receiver is totally the receiver. The gift itself is just totally the gift. But they're not in opposition. We can't separate them out. That they all depend on each other. With no giver, there can be no receiver. With no receiver, there can be no giver. Without something to give, there can be neither a giver nor a receiver. That they completely rely on each other. And that's what emptiness is talking about here. It doesn't mean they're meaningless. It means that they're full of each other and that they're full of the whole world. And yet, they still appear as a giver, as a receiver, and as a gift. So we pray every time before we receive a food. We say, may my receiving of this food be the opportunity for us to realize. Realize is like to get it, right? But realize is also to make real, to actualize, to make it live in my life. That my life to actually be based on the emptiness of the three wheels. It's interesting in the Chinese, the way that the emptiness is written in that chant actually means like emptiness and tranquility. So it's pointing at two things. May we, with all beings, realize the emptiness and tranquility, the fullness and harmony of what it means to be in the practice of generosity. So important that we get that breadth. Generosity is not just an aberration. It's not just an exception to our normal way of doing things. Although it might feel like that when you try to practice it. With your life, moment after moment, we're incessantly accumulating. I mean, incessant, like when you go home today, just look around in your house. If you doubt what I'm saying, there'll be a few of you for which this will not be true, maybe. But you'll just look around the stuff, and it's wonderful stuff a lot of times. Even if you take up the practice of trying to buy very few things or have very few things, there's a way in which it just sticks to you, especially if you have kids. I remember when my children were young, and it was like, no more gifts, please, no more gifts, because their room's getting filled up with weird plastic junk, and then we have to find a way to ask people, please don't buy them weird plastic junk. Just give them your heart or something simple. But also you don't want to shut off people's generous heart. So it's quite a difficult place. But here, when I'm talking about things, the incessant accumulation of things, I'm not only talking about material objects. I'm talking about phenomena, which sometimes a phenomenon is a material object. It's something we have. But a phenomenon is also an experience. Phenomena is an idea. Phenomena is an opinion. It's a feeling. It's an image. Everything that we could point out in a word, right? We could say this thought. That is a thing. And we are incessantly accumulating them. They're out there. We encounter them. Ooh, what's this? Put it in my pocket, right? We're doing that all the time. I mean, living now in a completely industrialized society where we just make way too many things, most of which are cause injury to ourselves and to the planet. We think that's what it's about, but what I'm saying here is it's about something more fundamental. It's about incessant accumulation, where the emptiness of the giver and the receiver and gift is not actualized. In fact, there isn't a gift. There is an object of accumulation. We're doing it moment after moment after moment after moment. So we don't want our practice of generosity to just be the exception, right? Although it might feel that way sometimes, that you're in a situation and it's just like, oh, okay, this time I gave a gift, the rest of the time I'm being really stingy, right? That's fine. Please practice that way. But we want to practice so that when we do have the opportunity to practice generosity, for giving and receiving, that becomes a place where it's returning us to something. We're taking refuge in something. We're not just pushing ourselves forward into some other realm where people are nice to each other. Right? We're uncovering some fundamental actuality of what it means to be alive. And we're taking refuge there. We're saying, I will return to, I will venerate, I will take refuge in the true form of being, which is not to be an object, is not to be a subject. That I can be free when I take refuge there. And the way I take refuge, in this case, is I participate in generosity. I'm willing to receive materially, I'm willing to receive emotionally, I'm willing to receive spiritually, all kinds of ways that I'm willing to receive. And I'm also willing to give. That is a place of real freedom. We're talking about the freedom of generosity. What happens through that enactment is very immediate. the relinquishment of the subject-object grasping, is also the release of the subject-object suffering, the cycles that have been accumulated about how it is that we will navigate this world of me and others. And as I'm navigating it, we have this unwholesome karma, which is where I feel insecure and I need to get what I need. Right? And so trying to pull together what I need, rather than asking for it, rather than simply being willing to receive, I create a dynamic with other beings so that I can get what it is that I need. Very natural, but also causes lots of anxiety, causes lots of problems for us and for others. So the practice of generosity, it actively liberates the heart that is bound in this self and other grasping. Right? It actively liberates it when we rely on generosity, when we put into action our life based on generosity. This is very different than just the aberration, right? It means when I give a chance to give a gift, Lulu's walking around in the yard and people are giving him the gift of their attention, and he's even giving you the gift of his presence and his, kind of cuteness, right? So in that moment, it can just be nice. It's a little relief, right? It's a little relief from listening to me talk or the worries that are in your head or whatever it is. But in that moment, it's more than just that. Actually, it's like inviting you home. And the whole world's doing that. Last Sunday after services in the morning, my wife, Azza, and I went to, we oftentimes like to go for a walk on Sunday afternoon, and we oftentimes go out to, what's that place everyone goes? Mount Pisgah. But we usually don't go up Mount Pisgah because it's up. And the horizontal walking sort of suits us a little bit better. Also, we like to bird watch. So we usually go there's some nice fields there, both north and south of the mountain there, and by the river, and beautiful birds, lots of interesting things happening, animals eating each other. Really kind of wild place. But last week when we were walking through there, the little grasshoppers, kind of the little ones. Bata is what they call them in Japanese, and I don't know I think they're grasshoppers in English. That sounds right. They're about this big, and they're all in the fields there. And as you're walking through the fields, the whole field just is like jumping. The whole place. It's just, and it's like magic. I mean, probably if you're afraid of grasshoppers, it doesn't feel like magic. It feels like torture or something. But it's so alive. And they're the same color as the grass, right? So you don't quite know they're there, but as you walk through, it's and that's the sound they're making. And what a gift. What an invitation to return. Right there in the stark nakedness of the natural world. We can feel it in this really direct way. There was a kestrel hovering in the air and swooping down, finding his dinner. There was the face of a deer. I mean that really literally, like the face. It was very eerie. Everything else was gone. So I don't mean to say that the generosity always looks pleasant, but it is alive. Now, in these discussions of the paramitas, which are all activated by prajna. Prajna is wisdom, so there's generosity, ethics, forbearance, vigor, meditation, and wisdom. The sixth one, wisdom. So we say that there are these 5 practices that are all activated by wisdom. Wisdom is what animates these 5 practices. So the principle of prajna is what makes all of these practices be practices of liberation. So when we're studying any one of them, we're studying prajna. That's why it comes from the Prajnaparamita literature. Right? So we chant the Heart Sutra on Sunday mornings, for example. That's the kind of most condensed version of the Prajnaparamita teachings. The Heart Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Heart Sutra, the heart of the Prajnaparamita Sutra. So if we want to study generosity, we have to study wisdom. I mean, studying generosity is studying wisdom. And what I've been talking about in these talks is this very basic idea of prajna, or of wisdom, that first was presented in this way by Thich Nhat Hanh, the great Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh. I believe he used a rose, but he said a rose is not a rose, therefore it is a rose. I've been preferring to use the word tree. So a tree is not a tree, therefore it's a tree. This is a principle or very foundational teaching of the Prajnaparamita. So a tree, again, appears to us just as a tree. It is exactly a tree. But if we can see past getting caught up in the marks of the tree, all the ways that we know a tree as being a tree, we can see that the whole world appears in that tree. It takes all kinds of things for that tree to appear just as itself. It takes water, it takes earth, it takes the seed, it takes sunlight, it takes our mind, it takes our eyes, it takes our idea of tree. And you could follow all of those things out, and you'd see that the only way that the tree is a phenomena is because of all the things are not the tree. That's how the tree can be a phenomena. Right? So this is basic. I don't mean basic like easy. I mean the central, impossible to crack with your mind truth of the Prajnaparamita. Right? We can kind of get it, but then the question becomes, oh, well, how do I live that out? Right? Or what does that mean? What's the significance of that? So there's a conundrum of prajna, right? Which is the thing that puts us right on the seat of this practice, of any of the paramitas, but I think particularly generosity, we can see it. And it's something like this. While a tree is not a tree, therefore it is a tree, if that's the basic dialectics of prajna. The conundrum of prajna is that the tree, being the tree, can only be done by that specific tree. Only that specific tree, which is the phenomena before you, it's the only tree that can do the treeness of you encountering that tree. You can't sidestep the tree in any way. You can't say the tree is empty, therefore we're going to swipe the tree to the side and just talk about wholeness. The actually wholeness is showing up as the total specificity of that tree. Right? With every, I'm thinking right now in my head is like a very old cherry tree with the kind of crooks and moss and lichen growing off of it. Every little piece of that tree is just as it is. That is emptiness. Emptiness is not the absence of the specificity of the tree. It is the total wholeness of that tree just as it is. The generosity of being that tree is offering to be totally and completely, specifically itself. Everything is doing that. You're doing that. So when we talk about returning to the true form, there's one, this is kind of technical talk, but there's one thing called the jiso hanya, which means true form prajna. That means that the prajna, the wisdom, the emptiness is form, form is emptiness, the tree is not a tree, therefore it is a tree. That wisdom is showing up as each individual thing all the time. That's called the prajna of the true form. It's the all-pervasive quality of wisdom. It doesn't paint over everything in one color. It invites out all colors in their vibrancy. And so generosity is very natural. Right? You need the tree. Your partiality is not a problem. Your individuality is not a problem. to be solved. Your unique you-ness is an invitation for you to receive what it is that you need. And it's an invitation for you to give. I'm remembering a young woman, Ako-chan. I haven't thought about her in a long time. She was a good friend of my wife's before we were married. Maybe just the end of high school, maybe just after we graduated. And we were on a train. Oh gosh, I'm a little weepy about this. I hadn't thought of this story for a long time till just now. We were on a train, it was in Tokyo, and I was going to be returning to the United States. And Ako-chan had come with Azusa, my wife. We were boyfriend, girlfriend at that time. And I was going to be riding the train out and taking the plane, and I didn't know when I would see her again. And so I started crying, you know. I'm an emotional person and deeply in love. And so I started crying, and Ako-chan took out a handkerchief. I still have it stored somewhere. It's green and yellow and red. We all liked reggae music quite a bit, and it was from some sunsplash she had been to or something, and she kind of wiped she was one of these really rare and beautiful people who was just unencumbered by a lot of worrying about what she was doing would appear to other people or something. She took it out and just kind of started dabbing my face, and then she gave me the handkerchief. And it still really affects me. And I think it was the first time that I got her a handkerchief. When I was back in the US, I thought, I shall get her a handkerchief. And then when I came, next time I met her, I gave her the handkerchief. Reciprocity, but not reciprocity like someone did a favor for you, you have to do a favor for them. It was like I just knew, you know. She also cries. So you can think about that. When has your own need called someone's generosity forward? When has someone else's need called your generosity forward? You know, when it's enacted, it doesn't seem like such a conundrum. But when you get up in your head, it becomes a real puzzle. What is wholeness? But I'm just a partial, weak being. It's like, yeah, that's wholeness. So this is why the practice of generosity, really all of the perfections, but here focusing on generosity, oftentimes the practice of it, the place where you have to look for, how am I going to do this? It shows up at the edges of what we know to do. It shows up at the places where we're not sure, how should I proceed? So in the stories I was telling a few weeks ago about Mokuren, who his mother had taken her incarnation in the realm of the hungry ghosts, and he doesn't know what to do. He's the greatest of spiritual powers of all the Buddha's disciples, and he tries to save her, but he can't. He's at the edge of what he knows what to do. Right? The Buddha doesn't give him better technique. The Buddha doesn't give him like more magical powers to be able to help his mother. Right at the edge of what he knows. Right? The Buddha says, give a gift. Cop to your partiality, Mokuren. Cop to your inability to save your mother. Now something else becomes possible. The noble woman who took a vow and became the Bodhisattva Jizo, totally crushed by the death of her mother. Had no idea what to do. But she made offerings. She knew to do that. The practice of offerings, the practice of generosity, both giving and receiving, is a direct enactment of prajna freedom. It's a direct enactment. It doesn't there's no theory necessary. And that's why I usually emphasize the very like a grossest version of it. Just give something, right? Whatever you have, just share it. Whatever weakness you have, accept the help. Because that itself is completely freeing. The incessant accumulation of things, clinging them to myself, defending, is released. And that prajna freedom is so sublime because you won't be able to accumulate it. It is not of the quality of the being able to be accumulated. All you can do is give it away. And it's such a joy to live that way. That's what we call merit. And it has a real capacity to change our lives and to change the lives of others. Anyone has any questions or comments, or outrageous remarks? They're all a gift.
I'd like to say something.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'd like to say thank you for the incanting, I think that's the correct word, of my sister's name over these last 7 weeks, Joan Cecilia Hunter, and I haven't known what to do during this time of loss. And you're talking today, you're pouring forth has helped me has given me a little frame, because I feel like while I haven't known what to do, I've been invited to come back here to my sister's daughters, and I just did it. And I don't understand what I'm doing, and I'm doing it, and I think there is joy in that. And it's okay that I can simplify it too. I don't need to understand it. I deeply say thank you, and my other sister also was joyful to know that I had the opportunity to be here and join you today.
One of my mentors and really one of the kind of co-founders of this temple, Kyogen Carlson Roshi, was the co-abbot of Dharma Zen Center. When I first moved back from Japan, he really kind of took hold of me, and I think he thought, oh, what's this wild young guy gonna do? We need to get him like connected. So he kind of took me under his wing, and it was really just an amazingly generous mentor and guide for me as for many, many other people. But the first time I went to a meditation retreat when I was back with their community, I just had planned to go and participate in the retreat just like everyone else. And he said, okay, Ejo, you need to give Sanzen. That's where you meet privately with a teacher. And I had never done Sanzen before. And he said, well, you do Sanzen. I said, well, I've never done Sanzen before. I don't know what to do. He said, well, when you had Sanzen with your teacher, what did you do? I said, well, I didn't have Sanzen with my teacher. It was just him and me most of the time. So I would just ask him questions. Like there was no special thing. It was just sort of there. And he said, oh, no, it's no problem. Just go in the room and people will come in and they'll tell you about stuff and just try to help them take the next step. And so I went to the room, and then he told people to come and see me. I don't think if he had told them, maybe no one would have. I'm not sure, but anyway, so did Sanzen, and then after a couple periods of Sanzen, and then we had finished up a sitting period, and afterwards, usually the teachers will leave the room first, and then the rest of the congregation will leave the room. And so as we left, he turned over to me and he said, "So Ejo, how did it go?" And I said, "I don't know." And without skipping a beat, he said, "Stop bragging." And it always really stuck with me, you know. It was like, I don't know. I was like, I don't know. I realized, like, I don't know how it went. He said, stop writing. You know, that wears off soon enough. So, so it's really, it's quite a treasure. And I think generosity is one of the places where if we really, practice it, we find I don't know more and more and more and more. So how do we embrace that? I don't know, rather than starting to know.
Ejo,
Hi.
at the beginning you spoke about Gen.
Say
And
again about
Gen.
Gen.
Yeah,
Yes.
I lost the thread of that. Why you started with the darkness and the
Yeah. So that's Gen. Gen is the term that's sometimes translated as subtle or profound, and it was like your Dharma brother Kogen. The Gen of Kogen's name is profound. Ko means to cultivate the profound. The profound. But I was talking about what's the quality of subtle or profundity that I'm talking about here. Is like the dark night sky, ungraspable and spacious. And the reason that I wanted to say something about that was when we think about generosity, it's one of the places where we can move to tangible things really quickly, and then our mind gets caught in the thingness of generosity, like the phenomenal quality of generosity. Like, I have this and I'm giving it to someone else, which is generosity. But it can obscure this other side. And so I wanted to bring that up right from the beginning. That prajna, and one way we can think about the subtle as being what is animating all of those practices. It is a way to think about prajna. And those qualities, like the darkness of the night sky, spaciousness, ungraspability, all pervasiveness, those are also qualities of prajna. Oftentimes, prajna is associated with the moon.
Ejo,
Hi.
one of the things that I come up against is, whether it's in relation to my working life or just generally when there's a limited amount of, you have a limited capacity in some way, and there's always requests or opportunities to step forward in different ways and engage with people, whether that means you're giving them something or just, you're moving something forward together. But feel like I have to limit my generosity and enthusiasm, protect getting the day done, getting actually the things on my list that maybe I don't want to do so much done, that need to be done and cared for.
Yeah.
And I find, like, for me, often I have a lot of anxiety coming up around the uncertainty around that, all negotiating all those interactions, and I think it's generally because I'm too much in my head, which is mostly my problem most of the time, rather than just in the embodiment of in spirit of what the action is. But can you speak? I mean, I know you must. I mean, running around the temple, there's all the time people asking for time. I know you struggle with this. How do you negotiate that and how do you keep grounded in spirit of generosity without, which is sometimes requires you to do hard things to people or to yourself that you may not want to do.
Yeah. Well, I would start by saying I don't know that I'm very good at it. Balance in that realm. But I escape sometimes, and that can help. But one of the principles that you might look at, which has been very helpful to me, is, and this goes a little bit back to something which Reiko brought up a couple weeks ago. There's a way we hear generosity, and it feels to us always like our practice of generosity is moving forward. Like I'm going to engage generously, and that's always like a forward movement. And we get out of balance because we're always thinking about it that way. It's always, what can I do? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And that's very noble. There's a lot that is important about that. But generosity is equally about stepping back. It's equally about receiving. And so when you find that kind of everything getting tight and you're worried about how to get it all done, one place to look at is, am I way out here on the side of generosity, which is just about me enthusiastically giving? Probably you are. And I get out there really easily. So I have to feel for what is the part in which I'm stepping back on the other side of the pole. Are those two really harmonized? And so that can be helpful. One thing I was noticing as we were waiting for to see if there were questions. I oftentimes think that when I taught high school, I felt a little sorry for my high school students because I'm unbelievably okay with long, awkward silences. Like I actually love them. So you're in a class, even in a class, I taught a lot of classes that were discussion based, and I wanted, there'd be these long pauses. And then sometimes it took a lot of encouragement to get people out too. That was not my only technique for trying to get students to talk, but I feel a little sorry for them because I'm so okay with that. But notice how that moving back, allowing for the spaciousness to be there, why does that make us uncomfortable? What is the constant flow of the accumulation of things that's normally happening with our consciousness, where we know what to do next, or we're grabbing onto something, we're getting it? What happens when we stop that and we're all just here together, but we're not trying to accumulate something, or we're not trying to get it done, or whatever? That place is a good place to study. What's the balance? That's Zazen, that kind of silence. But Zazen is a little bit very generous to us because we have starting and stopping, and we think we're doing something. So we can kind of pretend like I'm doing something rather than just being in the process of receiving and giving very, very naturally. So that's my advice.
Thank you.